The tariff war is heating up, and Carney has announced what his reciprocal tariffs would be, and these are the first rounds of changes we are seeing that will actually be affecting Canadian, and we've already just heard announced the first round of layoffs happening from these tariffs, although these layoffs are a little suspicious, so I think we're going to have to look into those. And Pierre has made two major announcements that I've not seen people talk about that I think could have massive implications and might even be a good idea to keep around moving forward. So let's get into it.
Canada is hitting back at the U.S. with tariffs of its own. It comes after Donald Trump slapped a 25% tariff on the Canadian auto industry. The result? Uncertainty in the vehicle market. Standing by live in studio to explain is CTV's Jeff Keel. So Jeff, what does this mean for those in the market for a new car or truck?
It might not mean anything right now, but down the road you can expect price hikes.
While U.S. President Donald Trump did not hit Canada with tariffs across the board, the trade war is still having a major impact.
We're not breaking out the champagne or we're not doing any fist pumps today because there are still very real threats to our Manitoba economy and very real impacts that we're facing.
There are tariffs from China on canola and pork, U.S. tariffs on aluminum and steel, as well as 25% U.S. tariffs on the auto sector, which are now in effect.
The impact.
So aluminum and steel get tariffs sometimes. That's just something that's happened on and off throughout the trade relations. So we do see that happen, as well as lumber tariffs. Like lumber tariffs happen quite often and it doesn't get talked about. But that's something that we see just doesn't make any news because this tariffs is just obviously the biggest news story right now. But one of the funny things that they said at the beginning is, what do the changes actually mean with the tariffs? Well, nothing, and it's like, because there are so many unknowns, even on these exact tariffs from Donald Trump. We have this here. It's like, is Canada tariff free? No, but we got the aluminum and steel tariffs coming from Canada into the US. And then, obviously there's going to be that there. But the bigger one that we're talking about is the all foreign made cars, including Canadian ones, also goes into effect today. This measure was one we saw coming. The White House announced it. Okay, but are there any exemptions? This is the important part. Yes, because nothing can be simple. Goods that are compliant with the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement will see no tariffs, but those that are not will be taxed at 25%. Okay, so the reason that that's so confusing is because they've said importers who bring cars in the U.S. under that agreement will be given the opportunity to claim their parts as being exempt, which means you could be paying much less of a tariff, no tariff at all. And that's why I think these auto tariffs are kind of going to wash out quickly. Like I've said in other videos, the average car that actually makes its way into the United States, is manufactured in Canada, crosses the border 8 times between the US and Canada. It's going to be way too hard for them to calculate the tariffs on these because of the existing agreements. So seeing how confusing it is, right now, it just feels like everybody's going, there's tariffs here, there's tariffs there. What does this actually mean? And like I said, with some suspicious layoffs that we're going to get into, but they say something funny in here too that I want to talk about.
Impact on the Canadian economy of the auto tariffs and the overall changes to global trade. Those are going to play out and they're going to hit us here.
So Prime Minister Mark Carney announced matching 25% tariffs on vehicles from the United States, not compliant with the North American Free Trade Agreement, but auto parts were spared.
So Carney made the same announcement as Trump. He just made it weaker because he also exempt all the parts underneath the agreement. So there's not that much of a risk on these tariffs because remember, the tariffs that Canadians pay are the ones that our own government puts in. So when he announces that he's enacting a tariff, that is a increase to Canadian pricing in theory. But of course, with the exemptions, I don't know how bad it's actually going to be.
As I told President Trump during our call last week, Canada will respond to the U.S. auto tariffs.
All of this
God, I'm being super serious.
has vehicle makers scrambling to find ways around the tariffs. The Birchwood Automotive Group has 24 dealerships, most of them in Manitoba.
It's very confusing. All I know is that we got some work to do. I've been on a number of calls this morning with various manufacturers as they work through the details, which are sketchy at best.
CEO Steve Chipman says they've seen an uptick of customers coming in over the last month to avoid the tariffs. He points out vehicles on the lot now are tariff-free, but down the road, it's inevitable. Trump's tariffs will be passed on to the buyer.
The price of cars are going to go up.
So that doesn't make sense because Trump's tariffs would not apply to the Canadian sellers of the vehicles. It would be the Canadian tariffs that would apply to those. That being said, we just covered that the Canadian tariffs would essentially be exempting almost every single vehicle we saw in those B-roll there. So yes, it's very confusing. Like they said, we just need to see where the dust actually settles on this. Everyone needs to stop panicking because some of these companies are using the panic to their benefit right now, which we'll talk about in a second. But let's get into Pierre's first announcement, which I thought was really awesome, needs to be talked about more and potentially held onto moving forward.
Together, we need to protect auto workers in Oshawa, Cambridge, Brampton, Windsor, Essex, St. Catharines, Oakville, Alliston, Woodstock, Ingersoll, and elsewhere. That's why I'm announcing today that a new Conservative government will eliminate the federal sales tax on Canadian-made automobiles. Everyone who's looking to buy Canadian, to support Canadian workers, will be able to save money as a result of this announcement. Axing the GST on a $50,000 Canadian-made automobile will save $2,500 to the car buyer. By saving cash-strapped Canadians' families their hard-earned money, we will increase demand for Canadian-made cars and keep more workers on the job. And I'm calling on the premiers to match our policy and remove their portion of provincial sales tax on Canadian-made automobiles. This will have the double effect of supporting workers in the auto sector and also tackling the Liberal inflation crisis that has made everything more expensive. Both federal and provincial sales taxes, were they removed, would save up to $7,000 for the purchase of the average $50,000 car. It'll mean big savings. For example, on a new Chevy.
That's insane. That's insane. If they removed almost all taxes, like he's asking the provinces to contribute as well. So if Pierre has had, as critical as I can be of Pierre, he has had a ton of awesome announcements, like the capital gains exemption if you reinvest in Canada, this tax removal here. Like, he is just nailing it with these announcements for things that I like to see, aka cutting taxes. But this one in particular, when you look at some of these Canadian brands here, like Honda Civic, CR-V, and Ridgeline, very popular vehicles. Toyota RAV4, very popular. You know, another big one, of course, you're going to see a Ford Edge. Those are all over the road. These are vehicles that Canadians drive every day. Remove the taxes on it. They're manufactured in Canada. That's how we reinvest in building a better Canada, keeping Canadians employed with these. Because guess what? I skipped over Stellantis here because, yeah, these vehicles maybe aren't as popular, which is important to note because guess what? Stellantis, before any of these tariffs have affected any actual vehicles, so nothing's actually been passed through because the dust is still settling on this, decided to do huge layoffs. Well, that's suspicious. Let's get into this.
Derek Gungle has worked at Windsor's Stellantis auto plant for more than a decade, showing up Thursday afternoon for what could be one of his last shifts.
How are you feeling today, man?
Nervous, very nervous. I mean, the future is really unknown.
Starting Monday, Gungle and his 3,500 colleagues will be sitting at home, this auto plant closing for at least 2 weeks. Stellantis, the conglomerate that owns Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, and Jeep, is also laying off 900 employees in the U.S. and pausing production in Mexico. The company's given reason, President Trump's tariffs.
This is like a man-made disaster.
All completed vehicles imported into the U.S. are now being hit with a 25%.
So, the company has quoted that it's Trump's tariffs, which they're not paying. Nobody's paying yet. It hasn't happened yet. The company's going, yeah, we really got to blame Trump. If you guys watched one of my other videos, I've mentioned that companies use press releases and announcements to kind of circumvent their negative situations. They have to do layoffs. So they'll say, oh, you know, we're going to go back to office. We're going to get people out of here. And then, oh, it turns out that because we moved back to office, all these people turns out they quit and we didn't have to lay anyone off, and it protects their share price. So what's allegation? These are just hearsay allegations, but it looks like they were not doing well before this was happening, and to protect everything, then protect their reputation on that, they're saying, oh, it's all because of Trump. But then I searched. Stellantis reported another quarterly sales slide on Tuesday. The automaker, owner of the Jeep, Ram, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat brands, said its U.S. sales fell 12% for the first quarter of 2025 compared to the same period a year ago. And they continue to talk about that in the article. Oh, and they go, oh, our retail sales are picking up, but their overall numbers are down. They as a brand weren't doing well. So I personally think this is a convenient time for them to go, yeah, well, we'll just shut down production for 2 weeks because of the tariffs. Really gives them the opportunity to cut costs for a little bit. They can ramp up production. However many cars they produce in that 2 weeks. Now they're not going to have oversupply, not going to have to worry about lowering prices if any of these tariffs drop off. That's my personal opinion. They are using this, what's the old PR term? Don't let a good crisis go to waste. And it seems like they're probably doing something like that. Speaking of that, Pierre has his second announcement, which again, loved this announcement because you like to see Canada investing in Canada, and a Canadian, potentially Pierre, for Prime Minister, who wants to actually grow Canada.
For years, the Americans have demanded we do more in defense. But the truth is, Canadians have been demanding exactly the same thing. And so I will commit that any extra revenue generated from expanded trade with the United States will go right into our armed forces. We will hit our 2%. We will take back control of our Arctic waters from the Chinese and the Russians. We will rebuild our military and will become a truly sovereign nation with a strong armed forces that can protect us.
100%. We are seeing a major polarization of the global world right now. Canada and the US need to work together. It would be amazing if we could make our trade relationship stronger and use some of that money to reinvest in the army. That being said, I don't know a lot of people now who are lining up to get into the army because Canada just spent the last 10 years basically destroying Canada as a country, making us very unpatriotic at the very least, if that's what I had to say. But personally, I thought Pierre crushed it with those two announcements. They were big ones that I'd like to see on top of the other ones that he's had recently. Very impressive. I'm sure Carney's going to find a way to rip these off too. If you made it this far in the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow a lot. You absolutely rock, and have a great rest of your day.